Hey again, everyone. It's like we almost never left. 45 minutes ago, we were talking ESPN and all the changes at the network and recent controversies and Sage Steele's conversation with Tucker Carlson. And of course, the feud between Norby Williamson and Pat McAfee, and McAfee winning in big fashion. So please check out that live stream. Had a fun time talking the landscape of the media and recent changes there at ESPN. Okay, we're here to talk Big Ten football with all of you right here at the Voice of College Football. We do appreciate you stopping by. Leave those comments and questions there in the chat. We will get to them. Super chats available for all of you. Also, Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App. You see that on the ticker down below. Had a few topics I wanted to hit everyone up with tonight. Otherwise, it's your show. So the call-in is available. Did I leave that in the chat or did I fail to do so? I believe I did, but the call-in is available and it will be there in just a second. Bingo. But our topics tonight, so we're going to look at week 1 of the 2024 Big Ten schedule. So this is the first week of April. First week of September, basically. I know that there are a couple games in August, kind of bleeds into August. You know, it's right on that September 1 line. So we are basically 5 months away. 5 months away from college football getting back here, and we can all forget about all the mess that is NIL and the transfer portal and a possible elimination of conferences and teams. All of that will be forgotten by some of us, at least 5 months from now when we see football. So we're going to look at the week 1 schedule. You can let me know your most anticipated. There's going to be several questions tonight because I want to see your response. Question number 1 would be your most anticipated game in week 1. We'll pull up the week 1 schedule. We'll give it a look. You can let us know your most anticipated game, the game that you will want to see above any other game in week 1 in the Big Ten in particular. Also, we released our quarterback, running back, wide receiver rankings in the Big Ten. Please check them out and let us know what you think. And we looked over 20 to 25, except for a quarterback. Of course, we just looked at the starting quarterbacks. So there's going to be 18 starting quarterbacks. There are quarterback battles to a certain extent at Rutgers with Gavin Wimsatt, the runner, who sometimes makes it painfully brutal to watch him try to throw the ball, but he can do it at times. But he's the runner. He runs the offense well. Of course, they've got the Big Ten rushing champion, Kyle Monangai, coming back. And so Gavin Wimsatt trying to hold off Ethan Kalkumanis, and the Minnesota transfers move to become the new starting quarterback at Rutgers. And really, other than that, there aren't too many quarterback battles. There's a bit of one at Maryland, although we would expect that Billy Edwards, who's seen time in relief of Talia Tagovailoa in the last 2 to 3 seasons, that he would be the starting quarterback at Maryland. So anything quarterback related, as again, we've released our quarterback rankings, running back rankings, wide receiver rankings, then bring those up to me and we will discuss. New quarterbacks entering the Big Ten. At Michigan State, you got Aiden Chiles, who is, of course, transferring in from Oregon State following his coach, Jonathan Smith. Aiden Chiles was the 7th rated quarterback in the country coming out of high school. He accounted for 7 touchdowns in relief of the Oregon State starting quarterback last year, DJ Uiagalelei. So much expected of Aiden Chiles' top 10 quarterback. So Michigan State could be in good hands there. Other newcomers to the Big Ten, of course, Will Howard at Ohio State, the presumed winner of that quarterback battle. Just too much youth in the form of Aaron Noland and Julian Sayin to challenge seriously. And then Will Howard, of course, with so much more production through 2.5 years as starting quarterback at Kansas State over Lincoln Keenholz and Devin Brown. So again, technically quarterback battle. Will Howard, I'm about 90% sure, is going to be the starting quarterback at Ohio State. Everywhere else, we're pretty much in play. Max Brosmer, Minnesota. Illinois, Luke Altmaier. Brendan Sullivan, Northwestern. Purdue, pretty much set with Hudson Card. Iowa, Cade McNamara, as long as he can stay healthy. He's only played 7 games in the last 2 seasons and did not participate in spring practice. And then let's see, Wisconsin, of course, with Tyler Van Dyke. There's a new addition to the Big Ten. Tyler Van Dyke, there's a wild card for you because he has loads of talent. He's got the arm to produce big numbers at this level, and he's done it. I don't know that there was a quarterback in 2021 for an 8 or 9 game stretch that was more impressive than Tyler Van Dyke at Miami when he delivered 350-yard passing games week after week after week after week after week, and 25 touchdowns and 6 picks. And much of that production coming against the likes of the better defenses in the ACC, Pitt and NC State, in wins for Miami. But Tyler Van Dyke has had questionable coaching, i.e. Josh Gaddis in particular as offensive coordinator. Injuries have derailed him as well. And also, I think with some players, whether it's a focus issue, whether it's an issue in just which they're just not as dedicated, and I'm not questioning Tyler Van Dyke here. I'm just saying there obviously are players who aren't as engaged, interested, motivated, all of that as other players. It's only human nature. You can go to your insurance office down the street, you're going to see the same thing. Everybody gives different levels of engagement, involvement, focus, effort, all of that. And the only reason I'm connecting that with Tyler Van Dyke, not to question his work ethic, but that he has plateaued and actually regressed. But again, I think part of that has to do with Josh Gaddis. A year with Josh Gaddis was not good for Tyler Van Dyke. And number 2, injuries. I give him a lot of credit for taking the field against Florida State 2 seasons ago, a game Miami eventually lost 45-3. And he was in no way in the shape to go out there and compete against a top-level defense or any defense. Could barely lift his arm, and he gave it a go. And his coach should not have sent him out there. So Tyler Van Dyke at Wisconsin, Ethan Kalkumanis at Rutgers, in a battle with Gavin Wimsatt. We've got, of course, the 4 newcomers in from the Pac-12, Dylan Gabriel, Oklahoma to Oregon, as what should be considered to be the starting quarterback in the conference entering the season. I don't know if it's going to land that way. I'm not that confident in Dylan Gabriel. I think he's a really good quarterback. I think he's fine. I think he's a top 15 to 20 quarterback in college football. But I think talent-wise, he's not at a 15 to 20 level. So there are a lot of players that could pass him. I think the same thing is pretty much in play with Will Rogers at Washington, where he's a really good player. He's a very cerebral player. Of course, he grew up in the Mike Leach system, and he thrived in the Mike Leach system. But this past season, 2 things happened. Again, much like Tyler Van Dyke. He ran into different coaching. I'm not going to call it incompetent coaching with Zach Arnett as the head coach, but a very huge change in offensive philosophy and approach affected Will Rogers, that he no longer had the Mike Leach passing attack to rest on and build the numbers. And then he also got hurt. And if Will Rogers does not have a gun, does not have that kind of cannon. He needs to be healthy. And Washington is one of the first teams across the country that many of us are pointing to as being a team that is going to take a downfall. We don't know how far that's going to be, but I would guess it's going to be in the 7-5 range from a 12-0 team. You lose one of the best starting quarterbacks in the country. You lose all your offensive linemen. They all scattered. They either went to the NFL, they went to Alabama, they went to Ole Miss. All those fine offensive linemen that built that Joe Moore award-winning offensive line. I don't know that it was the best offensive line in college football. They won the award for being that. So they had to be a top 5 offensive line. I don't think they were the best. They're all gone. They lost all those receivers. Rome Odunze and the rest of them. They're gone. One of the best cover corners in college football, Jabbar Muhammad, didn't just transfer out of Washington. He transferred to their arch rival, Oregon. So that's a big loss for them as well. So we're all expecting Washington to take a hit. And that's pretty much common thought there. Jed Fish comes in, of course, from Arizona. UCLA, Ethan Garbers at quarterback. Dante Moore fled to Oregon. So Ethan Garbers is going to be able to maintain that job. He's a decent quarterback. He's mobile. Had a decent stat line last year. UCLA or USC, of course, with Miller Moss. That's going to be intriguing because this is where we trust Lincoln Riley as quarterback evaluator, offensive guru, developer of that talent that he evaluated, that Miller Moss is just going to be that good because we're banking on one game. That's it. One game with Miller Moss. And it was a 6-touchdown game, but it was one game. So anyway, that's a brief look at the quarterback situation across the Big Ten. Hasn't been any necessarily breaking news that has caused us to think anything differently. The most impactful quarterback battle is at Michigan, of course, because I believe that they are one of only. I believe that Michigan's one of only 5 teams that can win the Big Ten. So Alex Orji, and I raised this during the discussion last week during the Michigan show. So check out the Michigan show every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. John D'Adamo talking Michigan football with all of you. I fill in host as well. And last week we talked about Alex Orji and our guy Ronan Sports Talk, TJ. He had his concerns as well. Alex Orji's thrown one pass in college, and he also was not a top prospect. And his completion percentage in high school was not high. It was like 54%. Alex Orji, I've made the comparison between Alex Orji just because it was an easy one. And there are some notable comparisons to be made with Jalen Milroe because it, boom, hit me right in the face. That hit me right in the face way before they ever played, thinking, okay, ahead to 2024, no JJ McCarthy. Look at what this Jalen Milroe's doing, and look at what we're seeing out of Alex Orji when he comes into these games and what we know of him as a big body Cam Newton looking specimen who can barrel over linebackers and safeties, but also has a strong arm, but not a polished passer in the pocket. So what's that going to look like? Oh, look at this Jalen Milroe guy at Alabama. Look at what they're doing with him. He got off to a rough start. He played not an awful game against Texas. It gets highlighted as a bad game. Yeah, he made a couple bad decisions that cost them in that game. But then they decided this is what we can do with Jalen Milroe. We are not going to make Peyton Manning out of Jalen Milroe. We don't want him back there dissecting defenses. One read, is that guy open? No. Pull it, run. It's a lot to ask of Alex Orji for him to become as good a downfield thrower as Jalen Milroe. I'm not saying that he doesn't have as strong of arm. I don't know that. Nobody outside of Michigan knows that because nobody's seen him throw the ball. But to be as accurate as Jalen Milroe was, it's one thing to have the cannon, the Terry Bradshaw, Joe Namath, John Elway, up to the most recent Joe Milton type of arm to throw it downfield. It's another to be able to throw it with accuracy downfield. And Jalen Milroe, he is the best example I can think of that a quarterback who threw the ball more accurately from distance than he did mid-range and short distance. Jalen Milroe. So I made those comparisons early last season. And then what happened? They played in the Rose Bowl. And I thought, here we go, Michigan fans. You can get to see maybe your next quarterback just playing for the other team. Maybe. If Alex Orji turns out to be Jalen Milroe, I know he's not J.J. McCarthy, but Michigan fans, be happy with that. Be happy with that. We did mention Miller Moss replacing Caleb Williams at USC, and of course, 6 touchdown passes against Louisville. And as we bring in Tim Prangley, I'm going to make this statement. I think I've said this to Tim. More so than Miller Moss's performance in that Holiday Bowl, what makes me optimistic that he is going to perform well this year is because of who his coach is. That you've got supreme quarterback evaluator. So he's determined, I've seen enough of this guy that I'm comfortable with him. Number 2, whatever's lacking, quarterback developer. So he's a quarterback evaluator, top notch. He's also a top notch developer. And then he knows what plays to call to feature him and put him in the best position based on his skills and abilities.
And the fact that he has those sophomores now that were coming along as freshmen, they're names that aren't known, but they were highly recruited, highly thought of in the recruiting process, and now they're working into their second year. You got guys like Deuce Robinson, Mekhi Lemon, who came alive in that game. He just blew up in that game. Wasn't getting a lot of play because you had Taj Washington ahead of him last year, so he was not getting into the game, nearly as much. But you're going to start to see these guys, and they have a rapport with Miller Moss because, again, they're running with the twos the whole year. So, so now they're going to have him as their quarterback, and they know each other. They've built up some camaraderie between the two, and I basically think that if there's a chance, that they can give him some time. The wild card really isn't Miller Moss. It's not the running back with Woody Marks, and Quentin. It's definitely not going to be the receivers. It's going to be, can that offensive line get situated? How does this offensive line gel with Monheim moving over to center? That's going to be the key.
And so, Tim, I'm going to leave the question out there for you that I served up to start out the show for people to leave in the chat. And we'll remind everyone that our first big spring game post games coming your way on Saturday night at 8 Eastern time. So the Clemson spring games at 2 Eastern. And then we got Jason Priester from allclemsontigers.com and myself getting together on the Clemson channel Saturday night at 8 p.m. Eastern time. So you get the word straight from myself and especially from Jason. All right. Question number 1, and we'll put the schedule up here so you can be better informed to not have to go off the top of your head. So we can put this on ice, Tim, but asking everyone most anticipated matchup in week 1 in the Big Ten. So that's your game of choice in the Big Ten for week 1. May
It's
not
easy
be
for
too
me.
difficult for you or really for anybody else. And I said this a couple days ago that I usually am the guy that's trying to watch 25 games at once, but I'll be pretty focused on this one. And then number 2 is I'm going to introduce this topic. So we did a live stream last night following and I don't know if you had a chance to see this article in The Athletic. It was very interesting. I do not remember the writers that put it together, but basically they think, or they were citing sources from places like West Virginia and Syracuse and other places, talking to chancellors and other administrators, that this is a very real possibility, but of an 80 team super league being put together. And so, Tim, if you're not aware of this, let me put it in play for you. You are. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that basically the 70 teams that are currently in the Power Four, we'll say, are protected. And so this is the first thing I like about this idea is, number one, we're not kicking Wake Forest and Kansas to the curb and others like them. So they're all protected. And then we are taking the top 10, whoever those might be. And I made a list of 10, and I'm going to produce a video on this, and I'm going to explain why these are the 10 best schools. And I've got them right in front of me here, the 10 best from the current group of 5, and they're going to be their own division, but they're very much fighting for their lives to stay afloat and to stay in play, because much like the Premier League in soccer, from what I understand, they could be demoted for poor play.
Well, that's the stickler, actually, Mark.
Yeah.
They don't. Actually, they're going to have, what was it going to be? So 80 teams, 80 teams, 8, I guess, divisions, or 10 team divisions. That 8th one is the one that can drop up and down.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yep. Oh, okay, yeah. So if you're in the top 70, which pretty much means almost everybody that's, won a conference championship in the past like 10 years, so it feels like, are going to be, the same old, the usual suspects. And then you're going to have some of those group of 5 teams, I think, once you get down that far, trying to creep in. And then you have some of the lower end Power 5 teams at the bottom as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to recreate the live stream that we did yesterday, even though I would like to, and because I would like to bring up certain things. But anyway, go back and check out the live stream that we did yesterday. These 10 teams that are current group of 5 teams, they're going in. This would be stupid, based on my thinking, to put them in one division. They shouldn't go in their own division by themselves. They should be sprinkled in the other divisions. Why would you put them all in one division?
To give them a chance of winning?
The worst 10 teams in this Super League are all going to go in the same division, and that division champion is going to go to the playoff, even if it's Tulane or Memphis?
Or I think it's just for television, to be honest with you. I mean, think about the league you're talking about. There's still going to be those big major matchups, right? And one thing I'm hoping, if they go to 7 different ones, I hope, and it sounds like they probably would, go to some kind of regional thing. We can get some regionality back and forth. That is the one benefit to that whole thing. Well, is the fact that you might be able to get, build back a real Big Ten, a real SEC, a real Southwest Conference, a real Pac-12 conference again. That's the only thing I can see out of this. But here's the other thing. Isn't all this stuff contractual? Like, isn't like whatever's set now will be for like at least the next 5 years or so through the end of the decade?
Well, let's understand that the current college football playoff contract goes for another 2 years, and they were able to tweak that, adjust it to this 12-team model for the last 2 years.
But I mean, like the big television revenue ones, the Big Ten, the SEC, these TV contracts they have going.
Yeah. Yes.
So I mean, that's really that's really the mover shaker stuff of all this. And what will some of these teams, like for instance, what will let's say a fringe team for the top 70 that might try to get into some of these programs, what will a Cal be like? What will a Stanford be like way down the road? Or a team like a Utah? Will Utah be able to survive? Until then, I guess I'm assuming and I am assuming a lot with the Big 12, but how many eyeballs are going to be on the Big 12 when you have the matchups you're going to have in the SEC and the Big 10 every single week in and week out? That's the worry I have about college football, is how many of these schools 5, 6, 7 years from now are going to be still as healthy as they are right now. The differences in the schools between what you get in the Big 12 and the ACC compared to what you're going to get in the Big 10 and the SEC is astronomical. And how are these teams going to be able to keep up and compete with the facilities, with the NIL, when they start paying players, which is probably right around the corner? How are these other schools going to be able to afford what a school like Michigan or Alabama is going to be able to afford.
We do our TV rating series every off season, and speaking to exactly what Tim just mentioned, looking at the Big 12 in particular, 14 of their top 17 rated games from last year just left in Texas and Oklahoma.
Yeah.
They left for the SEC. And now, to your point, not only have their two biggest draws moved to the SEC, but there is going to be more prevalent matchups. So take the Big Ten and their viewership dominance already, and now take the TV schedule that once would serve up a lot of decent matchups, but Iowa, Minnesota, Illinois and Maryland, whatever, mid-tier kind of match. Well, those are going to get kicked another network or two back because there's going to be more USC, Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon. With those four coming in from the West Coast, there's always going to be a good game, if not two or three, in the Big Ten among powers. So who in the world's going to watch? No offense, everyone, because I know the folks in the middle of Kansas and Texas are going to watch Kansas State play Texas Tech. I get that, but it's going to be like 500,000 people. It's not going to be 7 million people.
Yeah. Yeah. You're hoping for all these schools, because one thing we always talked about is, well, eventually, if we're right, this model doesn't work, it's gonna reform back. It's gonna split up these bigger conferences. It's go back to regionality, etc. But I'm just what's gonna be left, and what's gonna be left of this fan bases. That's the negative downside to the whole conversation. Mark, I should have asked you. I thought we were gonna go live on Twitter and Instagram, because it looks like we don't have anybody that wants to call the show.
Yes, my fault on that.
This time frame, just with the regulars. And I love the regulars, but this is a regular group that just for whatever reason for this hour they don't really want to call into the show. So I'm thinking maybe next week we will do the whole Instagram and face. And we talk about Facebook as well. So maybe generate some people that actually want to call the show and talk football.
Yeah, the last show that we did. So we just wrapped up a show about 45 minutes ago talking about a lot of dealings at ESPN, and I opened up on that whole situation. But yeah, we opened up that audience to Twitter, and we had a lot more people watching us on Twitter than were watching us here.
Well, I mean, on the SC show, I've been getting a lot of new first-time callers, and they're not coming from YouTube; they're all coming from Twitter. So, just food for thought.
This was a matter of me. Well, we're putting all these shows on X and Instagram and Facebook going forward.
Yeah,
this was me slapping this together at the last second and forgetting about that.
And I don't see the phone line anywhere in your banners. Did you?
No, we don't have that.
Who knows? Maybe there's one brave soul out there that's not afraid to pick up the phone and call.
Yes. So our line is, I got it. Tim, listen to this. I'm almost positive. 888-997-4539.
That sounds right. Rogers, you are a master with numbers.
997-4539. I got like 2 out of the 9 numbers right last week. But then once Tim told me, it's locked and loaded up there. Okay. So anybody that wants to call, we don't have to do a long show tonight. We can always just wrap it up here.
Yeah, no problem. I'm okay with that too. I got that C show to get ready for. That's we can do that. Well, listen, you're gonna miss all the you're gonna miss all the revenue rolling in. So if you can afford doing that, then
yes, I will miss the 27 cents that I'm earning right now on YouTube. So we'll get through these topics, and if nobody calls, then that's fine. Then we will be done. So yes, please, we're taking phone calls. Really, the StreamYard, unless somebody calls on StreamYard right now, and it's somebody new that we've never talked to before. Sure, I'll take it. All right, week 1 in the Big Ten. looks like that. And so here we go. We don't have network designations for these games yet. And why is that little drop down there driving me nuts? Get that off there. And we've got North Carolina and Minnesota showing up on a Thursday night. So what has always happened there, at least for the last 5 or 6 years, is that we've had a game on Fox and we've had a game on ESPN at the same time. Those have been the two marquee games for Thursday night to open the season. So North Carolina, Minnesota, I'm guessing that's going to be the Fox game. And then there's another game out there, I'm sure, on Thursday night that's going to get picked up by ESPN. All right. So then on Saturday, and by the way, North Carolina handled Minnesota last year pretty easily, 31-13 in Chapel Hill, but no Drake May. They both have new starting quarterbacks. Max Johnson, the former Texas A&M and LSU starting quarterback, is going to be at North Carolina. Max Brosmer, he's the FCS New Hampshire quarterback, starting at Minnesota. And I need to adjust my settings to get, no, they are on the Big Ten. Okay.
Well, Mark, we're going to have a guest picker too, because we just got a phone call in. Caller, what's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Tim and Mark, this is D-Rock Irish from Southwest Florida calling in. Want to go ahead and support you guys and ask your opinion if this college football league expansion takes place. What's your earliest predictions on when you see Notre Dame enter, or will they enter? Thought on that.
So you're talking about the proposal that came out that we all talked about with the 80 teams. Is
that right, D-Rock?
Yep. Yeah. You were breaking up, Mark, a little bit. Yes, that 80-team proposal. When do you think earliest you might see something like that, and when Notre Dame will enter that? Because I think it's going to be inevitable.
Yeah, so Notre Dame would have to be part of that, number one. There is no getting around that. They're not going to have this super league that gets completely reformatted and reestablished, and then Notre Dame's just going to kind of hang out on the side here. So this is basically a complete restructuring of college football with an actual governing body setting up all of this. So this is unlike anything we've ever seen, because we have conferences running around doing whatever they want, and we have Notre Dame doing whatever it wants. But this proposal very much brings this all under a governing body. So Notre Dame would be part of this. So that's number one. Number two, Tim brings up a great point with the TV contracts being what they are, signed through different years, but roughly 2030 for all these conferences. And what's going to happen with that? That's a lot to weed through. Because right now the Big Ten's got 18 teams and they're tied to Fox primarily. Well, they're completely as their primary network. They've got NBC and CBS deals. And then trying to figure out, okay, well, no longer these 18 teams together. There are 10 here. There's 4 over here and there's 4 over here in this division. And how is that going to play out? That's going to take a lot of dissecting and then reformatting and putting back together, but it's doable. I would think that because this current playoff, not the number of teams, but the current playoff deal ends after 2 more seasons, that this could get up and running in 2026 with a lot to be determined. But that would be, I think, the breaking point, entry point at its earliest.
I think you guys are at least more in your answer. Isn't there a point in the 12-team playoff, and when that ends, the 14-team playoff format, that after the 14-team playoff, which is either 2026 or 2028, there is supposed to be a quote unquote look-in by the playoff committee to decide on the status of Notre Dame and the G5. Do you think that might be the time period? Once again, I'm not sure if it's 2026 or 2028. They might look into that, and that might change around that period of time. As far as maybe, and of course, I'm speculating, might start that 80-team conference. Thoughts on that?
I'm just not sold that this is going to actually happen. I mean, I think eventually it might move that direction, but if they were gonna switch this whole thing up again, I think they're probably, if anything, they're going down to smaller groups of people. They're not going to do the 80. Like, why are they doing 80? You know, are the teams like Alabama and Michigan and Ohio State going to want to keep sharing the revenue, kind of, or like USC? Are they going to want to start keep sharing revenue with the Oregon States of the world, right? Are they going to want to continue sharing revenue with Rutgers, etc.? I think that really, we talked about this before. I remember when I was talking about expansion. One of the things I talked about was, okay, so when's the contraction going to happen? So we saw a lot of expansion, but we're seeing a lot of, I mean, I don't really call it like, you know, financially. I'm not saying in college football as fans. I'm saying financially, because that's what it's all about. It's all about dollars, the most attractive games that the networks can put on television every single week. The next thing is going to be is, who can we get rid of out of these conferences? And they're going to start weeding it down, is what I think. Because right now, look at the Big Ten and the SEC. And we're not going to name any names, but we know the ones that make all the revenue, right? We know the schools like Texas and Alabama and Georgia and Florida and then, or like the Ohio States and the Michigans and the Penn States. You're seeing a lot of revenue up there. But then we don't have to look too far to see, you know, where that drops off significantly. And then as you get towards the bottoms of both of these, you know, you think about how much money do you think Northwestern brings in revenue to the Big Ten? You know, probably not that much. So what's going to stop the next move from being, okay, so we got all the teams together that we want. Hey, let's squeeze out some of these other teams and then maybe bring in a couple more from the ACC, and then we're going to call it a day, and then it's a wrap. I think that's really the next step. And at that point, you're really going to see, is the Big Ten, is it really collegiate sports? Because with the SEC, I think we all know that answer. But with the Big Ten, there's always been at least, you know, the Big Ten, the Pac-12, this facade that, hey, this is for the student athlete. These are the universities. This is about education and this and that and etc. We're going to find out if they want to launch a school like Northwestern, because simply it's not going to bring in the revenue for basketball and football that the other programs are going to bring in.
You know, I think both of you guys know that I go ahead and listen in on other podcasts, and there's a podcast that's out in Utah Mountain Western Conference, and I'm not saying that they are correct on what they're surmising or speculating on, but they've been talking about this 80 Super League conference for the last 3 to 4 months. Then this article comes out from the Atlantic, and they're indicating that perhaps with the NIL situation, that the players are going to win out, and it's going to be billions of dollars that the NCAA will not be able to afford, and that the news media or the media itself, such as ESPN, is gathering forces with Fox, NBC, CBS, to formulate a situation where they could go ahead and sustain and get additional dollars, so they can go ahead and show this 80 Super League conference, which is going to be very similar to the NFL. I find that very interesting. I'm not sure if that would go ahead and develop, but they're saying that the NCAA is not sustainable if NIL comes through and favors the players, because there will be billions of dollars, and the media wants to separate themselves from the NCAA, and that there are actually scheduled meetings taking place with ESPN, Fox, CBS, NBC, along with the Big Ten and SEC. So I'm just throwing that out there. It could just be hearsay, but I just wanted to kind of give you the talk of what I'm hearing, at least on that particular podcast, which I think is credible in some sort. But I just wanted to kind of pass it on to you guys and want to know your thoughts maybe on that scenario. That's far-fetched.
Okay, here are my thoughts, D-Rock. I've got a lot of them that you just covered. First one, the overriding one would be, just keep in mind who you're listening to anytime you listen to me or anybody else, just in regards to what is that group's motivation? What is that channel's motivation? I have no idea who you're talking about. I've never heard of them. I know nothing about them. So I'm not questioning them in particular. I'm just saying that there are certain entities, especially the way this has been heading in college football, meaning the SEC and the Big Ten with all the power and them forming an advisory committee that has pointed a lot of people to draw conclusions that they're going to break off or that they're at least going to rule the sport. And we've already seen steps in that direction. They've already said, we're taking 26% more than the ACC and the Big 12. Yeah, those percentages don't even necessarily 21 million to 13 million. Anyway, 58%, 32%. Yeah, there you go. So they're already implementing disparity in the sport to show their value, their power over the other conferences. So just understand that if it's a Big 12 oriented platform, and again, I'm not talking about these people in particular, I have no idea who they are. They may have a little bit more incentive, some of them, to be pushing a narrative that keeps the Big 12 in play and in prominence and in an equal status with everybody else. And that's what this 80-team league promotes. A lot of people keep bringing up the NFL and that this looks like the NFL and this looks like an NFL style. Okay, what does that mean? To me, people are drawing that conclusion just from the appearance of what it looks like in the standings. 10 teams in each division. It's all formatted, all nice and even, and that's what it is. But beyond that, are we talking about, yes, we're talking about official salaries and formal paying of the players. But how is that going to work? That can work all sorts of different ways. If we're talking about truly employing these players like the NFL, and if this is one organization, this is not the SEC doing its own thing and the Big Ten doing its own thing and all of that. Do these players, if they want to be treated like true employees, are they going to be drafted into this league and be sent to the corporate office of the league's choice, just like NFL players are? We understand you're a quarterback in the state of Florida and you want to play at Georgia, but you know what? You're going to Washington. Bye. I don't see it going that far, but if we're talking about the NFL and truly employing players, then that's what that means.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. And of course, it's all speculation, Mark and Tim. I just wanted to kind of, excuse me, let you know what the narrative is in other places. I'm not banking on it, but they've been talking. I found this quite odd that this podcast out there in Utah was able to come up with something that 3 or 4 months ago became, I'm not saying substantiated, but the article from the Atlantic came out 3 months later, almost indicating almost verbatim what this channel or this podcast was delivering. So if anything out there, I think that that's just something to stay floating out there and obviously there's nothing definite out there, but I follow you guys often, and I just want to let you know that that's kind of some of the other talk out there as well. So I do appreciate the feedback from both of you, and I just wanted to kind of call in and kind of give you another position or another point that's out there. And there's probably 50 more other scenarios out there as well, but I just wanted to appreciate and let you know the info that I was hearing out there.
Thanks.
I always
D-Rock.
appreciate your calls, D-Rock. You're awesome, man. Thanks for taking the time to call in.
Okay. Thanks, guys. I'll see you later, and great job for both of you.
Appreciate it,
Thank you.
D-Rock. Just to capitalize, unless we've got another caller, just to capitalize, Tim, on a couple things that you brought up. One would be, this is the first plan that anyone has thrown out that is expanding the sport, that is expanding the number of teams involved. Every other plan, every other proposal, or any other speculation about how this is going to look going into the future has done the exact opposite. It's been restricting schools, restricting teams that don't bring the value necessary to uphold the TV contracts. So that's everything that we've heard, and it makes total sense that if the Big Ten's sitting here saying we're paying the Big Ten teams this amount of money, we've got these number of teams, why are we adding Kansas State, Oklahoma State, and somebody else, and then diluting the pool, and Ohio State and Michigan and USC are sitting there going, our payout's going to go from 90 million to what? 78 million? Why? I would love for the entire configuration of college football to stay together and for all those teams to stay within the landscape of major college football going forward. But the money doesn't dictate that that's going to happen. And then just to highlight another point you made, Tim, to emphasize it a little bit more, if the conferences themselves, meaning the Big Ten and the SEC, have just forced the playoff management committee to give them additional money and revenue split because they earn it, even before it's proven, we already just know that it will be earned because it's been earned in the past. And that's not just based on the play in the field. It's more based on the eyeballs that they attract. That why wouldn't the same happen within a conference? If this happens within college football, where the SEC and the Big Ten can say, we're worth $8 million per team per playoff more than our competitors. So do the math. It doesn't sound like a big deal on the surface. Big Ten and the SEC get 21 million per team under the new playoff TV deal. The ACC and the Big 12 get 13 and 12 million. It seems like, okay, 21 million, 13 million. No, you multiply that by 18 teams. That's an $8 million disparity times 18. That's 160 million. Then you multiply it times a full 7 or 8 year contract, and it's like $800 million more money. So the same thing could happen with Ohio State, USC, and those kind of schools going to the Big Ten and saying, everybody gets $90 million. And when Tim talks about a disparity, it's not like Ohio State's worth 95 million and Northwestern's worth 85 million and it averages to 90 mil. No, it's like, I don't even know. If you truly did the valuations on it, it might be Ohio State's like 400 million, Northwestern's like 3 million. And, it's broad. And so why wouldn't those schools, if we get into a situation where we're paying players, and is every team going to get, every school going to get the same amount of money? And then the USC's and Ohio State's raise their hand and say, wait a minute, we're bringing in by far the most money, and you're going to give us the same cut as Northwestern and Indiana to pay players? No. Our league is going to the playoff management committee saying we're worth more than everybody else, so you pay us more. We're the source of that more worth for the Big Ten. So you pay us more too.
Yeah. Well, we had a caller, but they're gone.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That just means the phone line's open again. 888-997-4539. Give us a call. Talking Big Ten, whatever you guys want to talk about in the Big Ten, but also, Mark, if you want to pull up that schedule again, I went ahead and threw us live on your Twitter and on my Instagram. So
I did not.
You guys
know
are
that we
out
could
there.
do that.
Feel free to give us a call. Let us know you're coming in from Twitter or Instagram. The number's down there on the bottom. Let me go ahead and.
I didn't know that we could do that midstream.
Nor did I. So I just poked around at it and hit it. But yeah, let's go. Let's go through the week schedule, and if we get some calls, we'll hang on. If not, we can get out of here, and I'll get ready for the USC show.
Week 1. Tim, I know that being a new fan to the Big Ten, you're going to get yourself acquainted with Big Ten football immediately on Saturday morning out there on the West Coast with the Indiana FIU game.
You know,
I know that's going to be a big priority. And you're going to be wrestling back and forth between that game and Iowa, Illinois State, Maryland, UConn, 3 duds right out of the gate. And again, we don't have the times available or the networks. Michigan, Fresno State. Okay, mildly, that could be mildly competitive. Fresno State shows up with a good team most seasons. The rest of this is a bunch of, just not a whole lot there. West Virginia could give Penn State a game. That is possible. It was actually a decent game. I'm not going to say that Penn State was threatened last year by West Virginia. That would be not correct, but it wasn't a blowout. Other than that, that's like the only decent game in the Big Ten in week 1 until, what saves the conference is Sunday night.
Yeah, well, USC is doing what it loves to do and schedule tough out of conference. I mean, even going back to the 70s, definitely in the Pete Carroll years, and then all the way throughout, really through our history, everyone wants to talk about, what everyone's overall record is. And that's where I usually have a problem with everyone's overall record, because it is rare to see USC. Well, first off, they play Notre Dame every single year out of conference.
Yep.
But on top of that, it's not unusual to see, you Big Ten fans, Nebraska, Ohio State. USC is going to bring in, play. Let's see, who else we got on the? You have to go back kind of a ways, but you're always going to have. One thing they don't play is USC Michigan. Really, just never happened. As an out of conference, game. It's always been like a bowl game. It seems like. So that's one. But if you look at the rest of the Big Ten conference, be it a Penn State, going back, you're always going to have those games. Going and playing LSU at Allegiant Field in Las Vegas in week 1 on a neutral field is going to be exciting. It's going to tell us a lot about both teams. Both teams have major defensive overhauls of their staff, definitely. And also on USC's roster on defense is an overhaul. I'm going to be interested. We'll see what Nussmeier can do. That's going to be a big thing. And then I love our secret weapon. Our secret weapon was years ago, we worked out a way to get Brian Kelly as the head coach of LSU. And I'm seeing if that strategy is going to pay off.
Okay. You're feeling pretty confident about playing Brian Kelly. I can't say that I really understand that myself, but that's fine. I, like you, have admired USC's approach to scheduling for years. I have always given a lot of due to USC because there is the Notre Dame game, and USC can't control how good Notre Dame is. But even during a time in which Notre Dame has yet to win a national championship, going back to 1988, they have fielded generally top 10 to 20 teams in the country almost every year, even during this dry spell of being at the very, very top. USC, unlike most teams in that situation where, for example, Florida State always plays Florida and Georgia always plays Georgia Tech, etc., they have not rested on their laurels to say, we play Notre Dame, we're done. That's all we're going to play. We're not playing anybody else. That's tough enough. And we only have 2 other non-conference games, so forget it. No. Ohio State, Texas, Alabama, even when it's not a complete heavyweight, it's going to be BYU, Boston College, somebody in addition to Notre Dame. So I've always respected that out of USC.
Yeah, and this is like a one-off, and it's going to continue because next year we play Notre Dame as always, but we're also playing Ole Miss. So we have a home and home with Ole Miss over the next 2 years. So it is a sense of pride. There's a lot of teams, we know who they are. They play a lot of cupcakes in their out of conference schedules, claiming that the reason why is because their conference is so hard or their other opponents are so difficult, they can't muster together somebody with a pulse during the season. And I'll say it, a lot of these schools don't have to. A lot of schools can roll out Little Sisters of the Poor. They're going to pack their 90,000, 100,000 people in their stadium, and the networks are going to pick them up. So literally, they don't have to. Problem is that usually it makes up some pretty bad matchups. But this year, the non-conference, matchups are pretty good. Like you have right there. I mean, for week 2, you got Texas and Michigan. That's going to be, Texas is one of those schools also that tends to always schedule decent out of conference games.
Who does?
Whether it's out Texas, it's Alabama
Texas
or USC or now
Yeah.
Michigan. I mean, Texas does a really good job of doing that as well.
Yes.
Not all national powers do that. Definitely not a lot of blue bloods do that.
No. Yeah. So this is week 2. And again, week 1 is one game that you have to watch. And there's 2 watchable games. West Virginia and Penn State, North Carolina and Minnesota are watchable games. The rest of it, unless I see that Illinois is losing by a field goal and there's nothing else going on and there's 90 seconds left in the game and there's some drama, forget it. The rest of the schedule's a dud in week 1. Horrible. I'm even going to challenge our buddy Jackson, the Jacksonian, to come on and tell me that schedule's amazing, because that's one of his favorite terms. No, it's an awful schedule. Terrible. Okay. So this is week 2. And as Tim points out, Texas, Michigan is by far, like USC and LSU, the headliner. Kansas and Illinois, that is the second part of a home and home series. Kansas won at home last year. That's a decent matchup. I can respect that. Iowa State, for me and some others, is one of the better always played rivalries, out of conference rivalries. Typically a good game and a must see, and actually draws eyeballs. If you look at the TV ratings, Iowa State always does extremely well. Michigan State and Maryland, there's a conference game early. Colorado and Nebraska, that could be an interesting game. So a little bit more life here in week 2. Oregon and Boise State. Okay. And I don't exactly expect Boise State to hang with Oregon, but at least they're a decent team. And Northwestern and Duke, they have decided that they have become rivals or something, because this is something like 8 out of 9 years that they're going to play non-conference.
Yeah, it's not setting the world on fire in week 2 as well. Listen, I was going to say, we now have more people on Twitter than we do have on. And here's one thing. The problem is you guys, we can see the chat here in YouTube. I dropped a link in Instagram if you want, but we are looking for calls if you guys want to call in. I don't know how much longer we're going to stay on, actually, if we don't get some calls. This is supposed to be a call-in show. But feel free. I put the number in the chat on Instagram. And I don't know, Mark, if you could do it, but you guys can see on the bottom, phone numbers on the bottom of the screen. Give us a call. Let us know what you think about the schedules. We're already into week 2. We're going to be on for a little bit longer, hoping somebody here. We lost a call. Someone called again just now and left, but go ahead and give us a call. This is your opportunity to call in. It is a call-in show.
888-997-4539. So we're not broadcasting on Instagram. You just posted the number, correct?
No, we're broadcasting on mine. I can't broadcast on
Oh.
yours. So
You're going to have to show me how to do that, because you've figured out the secret formula for Instagram.
yeah, get some fresh blood. I think if you want to check it out, watch the USC show tonight. Last time we had more people on. I think we had like 102 people on on YouTube, and we had close to a little over 200 people that were joining on Twitter and Instagram.
Very cool. All right.
But yeah, I think what I'm thinking now. Also, we talked about a different time for this show, correct? We were thinking about moving it from Friday to Wednesday, right?
Yes, we thought about that.
Okay.
I don't know if our numbers would. I don't know what to tell you. I know that this is, our numbers have not been good the last few weeks, but I looked back at the same time last year, and we were looking at the same thing, and then they shot back.
Okay. I'm just being selfish. Again, I have the USC show right after this, trying to work out that sandwich.
We'll take a poll. Who in the chat, what is the best night to have our Big Ten live show? And we will find out from everyone in the chat. Okay. All right. So, hey, last thing, I guess, the way things are going here, we will hit you with Miller Moss as the 5th ranked quarterback in the Big Ten. I had Jaquavius Marks ranked as the 10th best running back in the Big Ten, and Malachi Nelson as the number 6 or 7 wide receiver in the Big Ten.
Malachi Nelson.
Oh, I'm sorry, Zachariah Branch.
Zachariah Branch. You want to? I think you should re-rank it. And what I would do is I would. We're going to see. I think you're going to see. It's actually Mekhi Lemon. I think he's more likely. And Zachariah Branch is a spectacular football player. I don't think he's the best receiver on the team, simply because he's got the skills and he's working on it. But there's more nuances to it. Route running. He's there, and he's that gadget guy. You get him in space, he's going to house it. I mean, we saw it on kickoffs and punt returns. But as far as just your receiver, you're going to see a lot of Mekhi Lemon, Deuce Robinson, and Jacoby Lane. Those three guys right there. I know no one knows them. They were all true freshmen last year. Deuce Robinson was a 5-star tight end that you had. If you've been around USC football long enough, you would know. You've heard of a guy named Mike Williams. I'm not saying he's Mike Williams, but he's that big type receiver, and I really do think that he could be unstoppable on slants. He's definitely going to be a problem in the red zone, and he's taking the top off. He's getting behind defenses. He's a long strider, super good athlete, really strong, high points the ball really well. Then you have Jacoby Lane I'm talking about. This is another kid, tall, lanky. Think more of a guys that go up again athletically and high point balls. And then if you want to see your Amon-Ra type guy, your third down guy, kind of like what Taj Washington did last year. If you watched the Holiday Bowl, you had a chance to see Mekhi Lemon. You're going to see him get into his own this year. These guys are all true freshmen last year, playing behind 4-year guys, 3-year guys that have been in the system. Now they're going to shine. And while I'm not saying that they're the best receivers in the country, I would be shocked if one of those 4 was not one of the top 5 receivers in the Big Ten. I would truly be shocked.
Okay. If you don't mind, Tim, I'm going to blast our buddy Moose here. We love Moose, but I really can't tolerate this comment. I'm sorry. This is ridiculous. Okay. So DeReal and Moose are obviously going back and forth about 5 stars and SEC talent, so forth and so on. Okay. Yes, Alabama had 18 5 stars to Michigan's 2. I believe that is correct in last year's season. All right. let's understand that that was the best Michigan team that we have ever seen. It is certainly the best Michigan team since 1997. Okay. It's at least the best Michigan team. It's not even close. It's not like, okay, we would have to sit here and rack our brains and figure out what was the best Michigan team, the second. No. This was by far the best Michigan team since 1997, and probably better than that team, the best Michigan team in decades. Okay. Point number one. Point number two, that was probably the worst Alabama team. Maybe the second worst, one of the two worst Alabama teams since 2007. Okay. They played a game and Michigan won by that much. They won. They stopped Jalen Milroe at like the half-yard line in overtime. The best Michigan team, the worst Alabama team. Compare all the Alabama teams with all those 5-stars every year against the Michigan 2-star, 2 5-star teams year after year after year. There's no comparison between what Alabama football has been and what Michigan football has been over the last 5 years, 10 years, 15 years.
All right, we got a caller, Mark. You want to see what they're waiting on this? We'll see what they want to talk about. Hi, caller. Thanks for calling in. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Tim. It's Darrell MVP.
What's up, Darrell?
Not much. How about you?
I know why you're calling. We're gonna see what your take is on Moose's comments about Bama.
Yes, I would appreciate if I can explain myself.
Listen, we got no calls. The floor is
making that-
completely yours. Go take as much time as you want.
Okay, so am I on right now, or I'm in the back on hold?
Nope, you're on. You're on with Mark.
Okay, so Mark, how are you doing this evening?
I am doing just fine. Appreciate you being here, man. How are you?
Good. The only thing I said was you were reviewing the game, and all I said was, hey, Texas should beat Alabama. They should win that game if you look at who's got the better coach, who's got the returning production, who's got the better quarterback, and the overall talent. That's all I said. So apparently, because one happened where the team that was more talented, that had the better coach, lost, that means any game going forward, you can't use any of those analysis points, Mark. Did you know that?
Well, you may or may not have heard what I said in response to that statement about the 5 stars.
Right. Well, I'm trying to get away from using the 5 stars, since I will admit they didn't work last year, but I'm trying to figure out what categories can I use to make predictions. If I can't go by returning production, if I can't go by the coaching continuity, if I can't go by past history, what categories can I use, Mark?
Well, can I jump in for Mark? How about 2 lines that are stocked with NFL level upperclassmen that have been there 4 or 5 years? That's a good place to start for a winning team.
Well, don't you think that would favor Texas over Michigan?
Well, which game we're talking about? I thought we were talking about Alabama. I thought we were talking about Alabama because Alabama had issues.
I don't know why Moose brought up the Alabama game just because he wanted to use that game as a template and said because this result, of course, all other games are irrelevant going forward because of this one result. He used it as like an example when it was basically a statistical outlier.
At Alabama, we're seeing why, again, it's not like stars are irrelevant, and it's not like they just throw darts at a dartboard. But when it comes to certain positions, and I've said this for years and years and years, offensive line, predicting an offensive lineman, right, who comes in at like, let's say 290, and you want him playing at 320, and how he's going to play and how he's going to carry that weight, you know, what's his bend be like, et cetera, et cetera. You know, he's dominating everybody at a lower division in his high school league, and he's crushing everyone. How is he going to handle, like I talked about, a 5th-year senior across the line from him in his either his true freshman year or true sophomore year? You know, a grown man across from you is crushing. How is that going to happen? That's what I'm talking about. Alabama had a very talented line, but they did not, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. You know more than me. They did not have a very veteran-laden, talented offensive line. Is that correct or incorrect?
Self-discipline is something else I would like to throw in there.
Right. So this Michigan team had acquired a lot of talent, and they played together very well. You know, and they were coached. This was a Jim Harbaugh team.
And
this
I
is
agree
a Jim
with
Harbaugh.
everything you said, Tim.
Yeah, this is how Jim Harbaugh's always won.
You're saying. I'm just saying going forward. I'm talking about the future and saying going forward, that type of result isn't going to be replicatable for at least 2 or 3 years.
Well,
because of the way they made the sausage.
Well, it's a big issue as well for Michigan, and they're going to have to come to grips with it. They don't have Jim Harbaugh on that staff anymore. A big part of what that team was is now gone.
Right. I completely agree with you. But Mark, what categories am I allowed to use when debating people if I can't use returning production, overall talent, the better quarterback, the more historical quarterback, like he's coming back from last year to this year? What categories can I use? Tim gave me offensive, defensive line. What other categories can I use when trying to predict who's going to win a college football game?
Well, what you are doing is using a holistic approach, which is good, because for anyone who just wants to look at recruiting rankings or just wants to look at one category, of course, they are relying too heavily on one area, and you are trying to do a number of things. I have just not randomly, but strategically selected the year 2020 because these would be upperclassmen or guys that have just entered the NFL. And I'm looking at the best offensive linemen in the 2020 class. And I'm looking at Ohio State, Georgia, Nebraska, Clemson, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Clemson. Those are the tackles. At the guards, I'm looking at Oklahoma, Clemson, TCU, Texas A&M, Clemson, Oklahoma, Washington, Texas A&M, Michigan, Texas, Clemson, Oregon, USC, Iowa. I'm looking at center, Georgia, Ohio State, Northwestern, Washington, Texas, Tennessee. I'm kind of looking at most of the best teams in the country. So don't know what to tell you. In the past,
Tim,
we could grab the recruiting rankings and we could predict who's going to go to the playoffs and win playoff games. Now it's a little trickier with the transfer portal. Now it's much trickier. There's no question the recruiting rankings. I will argue this with anyone who wants to come on here and argue the validity of recruiting rankings because they have proven themselves over and over and over and over. Are they perfect? Of course they're not perfect. They're not going to predict every single player out of 3,000. There's like 3,000 players practically. 25 times 133, whatever that number is, it's close to 3,000. That's the number of players that get signed in college football. Of course, there are busts all over the place. And there are the TJ Watts or the that have elevated to, I'm not thinking of not TJ Watt, his older brother, JJ Watt, that have elevated from a 2-star to a Hall of Famer. Yes, you can give us the outlier out of 30,000 players in a decade. Yes. But the recruiting rankings I'm astounded at how accurate they are. Let me make one more point. We'll cut you loose here. The real MVP. Think about this, folks. These evaluators at 247 Sports, On3, Rivals, etc., they are evaluating 16 and 17-year-old kids. Look at all that can happen to a 16 and 17-year-old. They can be depressed about their girlfriend. They can get into all sorts of trouble. They can stop maturing physically. All the variables that they're trying to predict and project that this 16 or 17-year-old is going to be a 5-star offensive tackle, quarterback, pick the position 4 years from now, that they're going to be an all Big Ten or all American or whatever, versus what an NFL draft expert has to do. That is so much easier they're evaluating just about grown men. They're evaluating 21-year-olds, 22-year-olds that are entering the NFL. Still not an easy process, but still, they've basically seen about an 80 to 90% finished product. Plus, they've been able to evaluate the likes of those players playing against the LSUs and the Ohio States and the Georgias and the Oklahomas every week and playing like competition, as opposed to the dude that's a 5-star in the middle of Idaho that doesn't get to ever see anybody that's anywhere close to as good as he is, and trying to evaluate him. I think that they do an astoundingly good job ranking these players. I think it's phenomenal, the job that they do.
Well, okay, hold on. Okay. So here's my take on it. What I don't like about it is how they re-rank these kids, right? They come out, they're talking like now in like March, April, May, June, about these kids, and they're all 5-stars, and they're this, and they're that, and they're whatever, right?
There's only about 35 of them are 5-stars.
Well, no, 4-stars. There's hundreds of 4-stars.
Yeah, you said 5-stars.
Well, yeah. 5-stars and 4-stars, right? The top 100 kids.
Yes.
Right. And I'm telling you, I bet you Darrell and you and I, if we had their resources and we know which coaches, because what I would look at first is I'm looking at, okay, forget offers, because offers get sprayed around everybody. Which one of these kids are going back for repeat visits? Who are getting these official visits, sent to them? Who are these coaches really going after, right? Who are these coaches visiting in home? Who are these coaches showing up to watch their games in high school in the fall? And then you track that, and it's not too hard to fit. And you look at the measurables, right? We know a guy that's 6'6", but he weighs 140 pounds, probably not going to be able to put the frame and the weight on, and the body on within a couple of years to be an offensive lineman. But however, if I see a guy coming in and he's between 280 and like 300 pounds, and he's got the frame, he played basketball in high school, through shot put, he's athletic. You've got Ohio State and Alabama and Georgia and Michigan coming after him. Where are we going to rank him, Mark? I think we give it too much juice. And like when you hear these guys, my favorite year was, this is true story, Oregon beat USC by decimal points for like in one of these years, right? For being the best team in the Pac-12 or whatever. And I literally had guys championing getting all excited because with some arbitrary, I wouldn't say arbitrary, that's too far, but with just some non-empirical numbers that we're throwing up into some little generator system, and you want to break it down to between 20 and 25 people, and then coming down to a decimal point and saying, we recruited better than you did. Look what On3 said. It's like,
yeah, that's not what I'm talking about.
Are you kidding me? And the case for what I love is, well, we got 5 4-stars. The difference between a 4-star that's a top 50 4-star that we know is going to be starting at Alabama his sophomore year, and the 4-star that's probably maybe in year 4 or 5 is going to maybe get in late in the third quarter, and get like 20 reps, right? There's a huge difference. And you see that a lot in these, who wins, which class is the best, which is this, which is that. We see it all the time. And you would think that these 5-stars, it's what statistically is it less than half of the 5-stars even get drafted in the NFL. Is that true?
Yeah, which is a phenomenal statistic.
I don't think so. Because here's what I'm saying. They only picked 32 of them. If you're telling me you get to pick only 32, you get to see the entire country. You get to see who Alabama wants, who Ohio State wants, who Texas wants, who USC and Oregon are going after. So you narrow down your field, and you're telling me you can't hit 25 out of 50? Heck, I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm not willing to say it's amazing science these people have.
You're missing my point, Tim, because so forget the whole argument about the fans have the one-upsmanship against their rival about we were a 10th of a decimal point, therefore we had the better recruit. That's stupid. I don't throw a fit when Ohio State is the number 4 recruiting class every year and going, oh, they're done. They can't win national championships because they didn't have the number 1 recruiting. That's stupid. Okay. you know, you can't have the number 25 recruiting class, but you know that you need to be in the fight. And then it's all about fit. It's about scheme. It's about development. It's about all those things. But to your first point, Tim, you basically proved my point. I'm not necessarily, and maybe I miscommunicated, that I'm not giving them total credit for making the evaluation, that they're that good at making the evaluation. So I apologize if I miscommunicated that. My point was that the final evaluation, regardless of where that came from, if they're completely stealing from calling Ryan Day and Lincoln Riley and all these guys and saying, who's your number one tackle? Who's your, even if we know that they're not quite doing that. And that's where they're coming up with their, whatever it is, I'm just making the statement that the recruiting rankings are that accurate in telling us who the best teams are going to be after the classes come in. It's astounding how close they are.
At the end of the year, when they look at it's almost like what trips me out the most is we say, look at how accurate the teams that they picked are the teams that win the national championships. Or is it the other way around? Do they pick the teams to be their best recruiting teams?
I don't care
that win
what
national
it is.
championships, that have the best coaches, right? That have the best facilities, that have
Whichever.
everything.
When people
Right.
tell me that I play this card to an extreme, I don't play it to an extreme. At the end of the 10-year college football playoff era of 4 teams, if you looked at the top 6 in the recruiting rankings for the composite for those 10 years, it's the same 6 teams that played the most games in the college football playoff. It's exactly lined up.
We could also say, though, it's those schools and really that coach. I mean, look at the coaches we're talking about. You could probably, there's like, what, 4 coaches, 5 coaches? And you say, these are the best coaches at the best schools. They're going to win with a lot of rosters. You don't need, some of these coaches at those schools don't need to have the top 5 recruiting class. They don't need it. So you could hedge your bets if you're like, I don't know, one of these. I've seen it. I've seen it to where, depending on where the kid goes, they drop. Depending on where they go, the kids go up. You can't tell me that where they decide to go to school doesn't change their, because that's
not what I'm arguing.
But Mark, that's what everyone based on. Well, look at how accurate it is with the national champions. Look at the top 5 teams. It's the same teams that are recruiting really well. But the inverse of that is they're picking the teams that they know are going to be top 5 programs, and I've always been top 5 programs.
But that doesn't mean that they're not ranking a Northwestern center to be the 3rd best center in this class and saying, well, it's Northwestern. He got signed by Northwestern. We're dropping him to number 57. No, he's the number 3 center. So they're still making talent evaluations.
And we do know that the best players, who is Nick, does Nick Saban going to want to take a mid-level defensive lineman or mid-level corner or safety? Obviously not. So he's going to get the better players in the country, and his evaluation and his coach's evaluations are going to be accurate. I'm saying that I do think that they bump these guys, because how do they get their credibility? By the argument that you just gave. Well, the guys that they're ranking the highest are the ones that are helping win national championships.
Again, it's less of a defense of their evaluation skills, and it's more of a defense of whatever they use to put in the secret sauce. It comes out at the end to accurately reflect the teams with the best talent that win the most games. Are there aberrations? Yes. Does Wisconsin outplay its recruiting ranking? Yes. Did Texas until last year underplay its recruiting rank? Absolutely. There are exceptions, but it's pretty damn close. However they do it.
Again, it only holds up if you say,
point, Tim, and this is actually to your point. I'm not saying that there aren't politics involved too. That, for example, it's been argued, and I would not argue against this, although the evidence has not been proven to me, but I get the point that if a player, let's say the number 1 running back in the nation, makes it well known way ahead of time, he's going to USC. I'm a USC guy. I've been in Southern California. That's all I care about. I'm not even looking around. I'm a USC guy. Well, they want to sell clicks to the pages. They want these guys to be the higher rank to be undecided and there to be a fight between Georgia, USC, and Michigan over the number one running back. And so I'm not saying that politics doesn't come into play. I'd be foolish not to think that it does to a certain extent to draw clicks. But I'm just saying the end result is that the recruiting rankings line up with the wins and the losses and the championships.
And again, I'm not arguing that point with you either. Where I get frustrated is when people talk about how great their class is and we were 3 and you were 7 and those close shaves. I'm
sure.
with you. If you're, I agree that these guys have figured out a system, like you said, however they make the sausage, whatever's going on behind the curtain, whatever strings are pulling, it is fairly. And by the way, that accuracy has gone down significantly since the advent of the transfer portal.
Sure.
So, and again, we can't blame them for that because that's just the nature of the beast. So these days, if you get a top 5 recruiting class in 2022, but for 2 straight years, you get the top quarterback, a couple of top linemen, where are you now? Like what that class you had, do we re-rank the class every year? Because I mean, what your class was 3 years ago doesn't really make, what if you're Texas A&M and you lose all those guys, so the rankings, the individual rankings, you see, look at offensive linemen, how many 3-stars. I'm not saying I get it. I do get it. But what are the odds of 3 stars making it? I get that as well. I'm saying when you break it down to individual, I think that fans tend to make these numbers 5-star, 4-star, 3. Oh, he's a 3-star. Forget that. Yeah, but you have Nick Saban flying across the country to see that 3-star. You don't think that guy can play ball? I mean, that's where I get frustrated, is when people start looking at this stuff, either A, as a whole class, if they're the number 7 class or better than number 11 class, or, or you have a particular player. Well, he's a 3-star. I mean, this team's got 2 5-stars and a 4-star. I mean, that's a 3-star. It's, I just, it's been a pet peeve of mine for a long time. Yes, overall it washes out. But again, I think I told you how the sauce is made. They look at where these kids are going, and then they kind of bump their things so that Ohio State's always going to be in the top 5. And Alabama's always going to be in the top 5 because they don't want to have, move them out of it. One, because they're getting the best players. Their coaches at Ohio State aren't grabbing trash. So, if they're going and signing guys in Florida, they're probably pretty good ball players. You know what I mean? I just don't think there's this science to it that a lot of people want to put to it. That's all.
Still with
and as
us,
always, now I got a half hour, so I got to run.
Yeah, Tim, that was a good rant. You and Mark went back and forth on a good discussion.
Well, I was waiting for you to break in.
Well, I didn't have a real point I wanted to go with it, and you all just kept going back and forth, so I was just a spectator. I enjoyed it. But something else I wanted to bring up, Mark, is yesterday you were talking about how many teams can actually win the national championship. And I was having a few Michigan fans in the comments, to give them specific names, Mike G and Ralph Wolf. They were arguing like 20, 25 teams could win the national championship.
No.
And their argument was basically use the Michigan blueprint for those teams to win the national championship. What do you think about that?
I want to see it be proven first. I think that the transfer portal has given teams opportunities to upgrade immediately. Think about offensive line's a perfect example, as Tim brings up, because it's the position that requires the most development, the most cohesion, the most working parts between all the players along the front that have to work together and all of that. If a coach goes to spring practice now and he's like, I only like about 3 of these offensive linemen and one's out of position, but we got to play him out of position, we're kind of screwed. But nope, the transfer portal is going to open on April 15th, and it's going to give teams the opportunity to go out and do something. I think, as we've discussed in the past, Daryl, that this playoff format that many people see as, oh, look, this is going to open up the field to all these teams to compete for the national championship. That is true, that it's going to give them the opportunity to compete for a national championship. But that business that we saw with TCU 2 years ago, where they came within 1 game of winning a national championship, one game and a like universe away from winning a national championship. That is going to go away because of the gauntlet that a TCU is going to have to face to get to a national championship once they reach the playoff. Even during the 4-team, the difference between reaching the playoff and being a legitimate national championship threat and winner, completely two different levels of teams.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Mark. And the only thing I would like is for these people with these worldviews just to come in and explain it to me. How come Iowa can legitimately win the national championship? How can Kentucky? I was legit. Kentucky was thrown there. How can they win the national championship? I just don't see it ever happening. I mean, to be honest with you, Mark, this year there's only 5 teams I believe can win the national championship, like any possibility, and they're Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, Alabama, Georgia. Everybody else's season's irrelevant if your only goal is to win a national championship.
I would
I
stretch
think
it a
the
bit beyond
real
that.
depth of the sport is the way of them saying who's in the playoffs, everything being so playoff centric when it used to not be that way.
Unless we start to pay the players and this becomes a true format in which there's a governing body and it's almost a professional league and there's a dispersion of talent. But I don't think that this whole model is going to go to that degree. I don't think you're going to look at Georgia and Alabama and USC and tell them that they've got to share talent and force kids to go to schools they don't want to. That's never going to happen. I almost want it to happen just to say, okay, this is what you wanted. This is what we're going to now do. We're going to be a true NFL model. So you're going to get shipped to the team and the school that we ship you to, but it's not going to get to that degree. There's no way.
We're trading you to UConn for 2 guards and a box of baseballs.
Yep. All right, DeReal. Anything else, man?
Well, thank you for having me on, and thanks for the good conversation. Again, as I said earlier, I would love to hear somebody from the opposite opinion call in and explain to me why I'm wrong, because it never happens, Mark. And I would just love for somebody to explain it to me.
Yeah,
their
I would love to
opinion.
know
But
when
anyway, thanks for having me on.
Thanks a lot, DeReal. Appreciate it. Yeah, when is the last time an outsider won the national championship? The last time an outsider won the national championship would have been 1990 when Georgia Tech and Colorado split a national championship in a much different situation in which they could back into bowl games and play, as in Georgia Tech's case, the number 15 team in the country in a bowl game and play in a horrendous ACC that did not include Florida State and all the teams that are included now. And they could backdoor their way into a national championship, a voted national championship. That's a different world.
Well, Mark, we got a call. Oh, we got 2 calls. We got D-Rock's call, so that's good. We got those in the books. I think that next week we should possibly think, because again, Friday is kind of hard when I'm trying to throw the C thing together too. But
Okay.
But we can start, again, we have 129 on and we only have 57. So yeah, so we have more people on your Twitter. I pulled the Instagram, but we have more people on your Twitter. So I think maybe you should start out with the Twitter, and we should just go for some phone calls from there, because I guarantee you, we get the right topic, you got Twitter popping, we're gonna get some phone calls.
If we could make money, we would do a Twitter exclusive show. That's what we would do.
Build it and they will come, Mark.
Tim and Matt in 25 minutes on the USC channel, everyone. We want you to move on over, continue the conversation. If you're just having a big chat in the chat, you can do the same thing on the USC channel. Talk USC football with Matt and with Tim. They are the best, and you can call them as well. Tim, appreciate you doing this, man.
Anytime, Mark. I'll see you later.
All right, everyone. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. I am going to make a list of topics that I'm going to produce videos and or live streams on. And topic number one is going to be this 80 teams. So again, check out the live stream from yesterday. We dissected this article that came out from The Athletic of the 70 team model. So it's 70 current. So if you add up the ACC, the Big 12, the SEC, and the Big 10, you get 69 teams. I believe that's the number. 18 plus 16 is 50, plus 16, 18 in the Big 10, 16 in the SEC, that's 34, 16 in the Big 12, that's 50, 17 in the ACC is 67, Notre Dame 68, Oregon State, Washington State 70. There you go. 70 teams, add 10 from the group of 5, the 10 very best. And so we will form the 80-team league. We'll look at the 10 that need to be added, who has the best candidacy based on TV markets, based on winning on the field, all of that included. We'll present the 80 teams and go from there. I also was going to ask everybody in the chat tonight who should get kicked out. If there's anybody's going to get kicked out, and if obviously if the 80-team deal survives and that becomes the proposal that is initiated, then nobody's getting kicked out. But with all this talk about the SEC and the Big Ten taking over and making this a 32-team or 48-team deal, then somebody's going to hit the bricks. But that and so many other videos are going to come out. We're going to look at the top 10 non-conference games and the top 10 games of the year and all that other business here very soon, right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you being here. The USC Call-In Show is next, 9 Eastern, 6 Pacific.